A long campaign is now.
This is the car market in Mogadishu.
NATO's military success against
many Western nations.
This is on assignment.
From politics to the latest in the tech world, we've got it all for you this week. Welcome to On Assignment. I'm Alex Villarreal. Imran is off today. All right, coming up, the new U.S. Congress. Republicans go toe-to-toe with President Obama. We get the inside scoop on all the action. Information warfare, how the Islamic State is using social media to instill fear. And can a computer print your house? All this and more up next. On Assignment is on the air. It's official. Republicans now control both houses of Congress, and that means they have even more power to counter the Obama administration and its policy goals. VOA congressional correspondent Cindy Sain tells us what that's going to mean for the president and the big issues as this power shift takes hold.
So Cindy Sain, you've been on Capitol Hill for 5 years. Now things have changed now. There's a Republican-controlled Congress and Senate. So what's going on up there? People are coming, people are going.
Yes, that's right. It is a huge change. Physically, people are moving offices. There's chairs and desks and everything all out in the halls. And whoever Republicans are now in the majority, so they get the bigger offices, the nicer offices. There's the weekly Senate luncheons. The Republicans now have the nicer room to hold their luncheons.
After a vacation with his family in Hawaii, President Obama returned to Washington to face a stark new political reality. Incoming Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell told CNN's State of the Union that the Senate will vote on a lot of things the president is not going to like, such as a proposed oil pipeline and energy deregulation. One of the new Republican members of Congress, Mia Love, says lawmakers need to pay more attention to voters.
You know, we have faced dysfunction because people on both sides of the aisle have said, you know, we want Americans to trust us again, and we've got that backwards. We have to trust the American people again.
You know, it's hard if you've been used to being in the majority and then all of a sudden you're not the chairman. But of course, it also comes with real power, these committee chairmanships, and also in deciding what gets put on the agenda. And now, you know, we're probably going to talk about there's this ongoing Iran nuclear issue. The president is very much invested in this diplomatic approach, international talks, and some in Congress say, look, this has been going on long enough, we need to apply more sanctions. And we saw this playing out interestingly with House Speaker Boehner.
Inviting the Prime Minister from Israel.
Exactly. And some have commented that it was a bit striking that it came on the day after the State of the Union speech. And reporters asked Speaker Boehner, you know, did you consult with the White House on this? And he said, no, I did not consult with the White House. I don't need to. We can invite foreign leaders. But everyone says that usually these sort of having a foreign leader come and address a joint meeting of Congress is usually done after lengthy consultations with the White House and the State Department. And usually the leader will also be meeting with the president or with White House officials or something like that.
So that's going to be one big topic. So, but aside from that, what is going to be their agenda? They don't really know what that is yet, or they have to. It's going to take a little bit of time to put it together.
Right. I think it will take some time. I think there's some areas where they may work together, that they all want tax reform. Interestingly, congressional Republicans and the president are more on the same page about international trade agreements, and also on the issue of authorizing the operations that are already gone on in Iraq and Syria against the group that calls itself the Islamic State.
Who are some of the more interesting politicians that you've spoken with over the years? Do you have any that tend to open up a little bit more?
Yes, on the House side, Republican Tom Cole, who's been around for a long time, and he loves talking to reporters. He likes VOA, and whenever I go to him, you know, you get the straight answer of what exactly is going on. And he seems to have in his party a sort of a very moderate, pragmatic position, so he's a great one to go to. And on the Senate side, I mentioned Senator Bob Corker, who is also very forthright, and like I said, oh, hello, VOA, you know, whenever we walk up to him, and also, you know, seems to take a very pragmatic stance. Another one which may be familiar to our international audience is Senator John McCain, who literally...
He's always available.
He's always available, and he's says, you know, ask me anything. And he's now chairman of the Armed Services Committee, so he'll be playing a very influential role once again.
Political corruption is a huge problem around the world, and it's not something you'd be expecting someone to get an award for. But that's exactly what's happened in the case of Russian President Vladimir Putin. A group of journalists based in Europe, known as the Organized Crime and Reporting Project, named Mr. Putin their 2014 Person of the Year. VOA's Jeffrey Young is on the corruption beat for us and tells me what's really behind the designation. Jeff, in naming President Putin Corruption's Person of the Year, what is this group accusing him of?
The Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project is the entity that made this award, if you want to call it that dubious honor. They did this because, in the words of Drew Sullivan, the editor of the OCCRP, he said, Putin has been a real innovator in working with organized crime. He went on to say that he's created a military, industrial, political, criminal complex that furthers Russia's and Putin's personal interest, all one and the same.
I want to bring up a comment that you received on your article, a critical comment, saying that reporting like this only serves to, quote, further inflame tensions between the U.S. and Russia. What's your response to that?
We have to report the truth. When we have facts on the ground, and we have things to present to the people, it is an obligation. This is my job as a journalist. If I know this information, my responsibility is to make this information known. So in response to that, all I can say is, you're dealing with someone who, J. Edgar Hoover, the director of the FBI a half a century ago, characterized the Kremlin as the masters of deceit.
So how does his history and his involvement with the KGB, how does all of that then culminate in this, him being named Corruption's Person of the Year?
It is a vast system of mutual enablement. If I am above you, I deliberately let you involve in a little bit of corruption. And by doing that, you can put a little bit in your pocket. But because I'm letting you do that, I now own you, okay? And if you want to go up the ladder, you get all the way to the top of Putin. When he came to power, he very ingeniously had his security forces go out and arrest major Russian organized crime figures and then release them. And by releasing them, he's saying, okay, I own you now. We do business. We do it my way.
Right. And this is not just Mr. Putin alone, right? Let's talk about his inner circle. He has a lot of people around him who are helping him at every step.
There is something in Russia, there's a term in Russia, it's called siloviki. The siloviki are people who came up through the security services like the KGB or came up through the military. And this is the inner cadre that Putin is at the top of. I had a conversation with the global head of Transparency International, Senor Jose Ungaz, and in that conversation, he described the Siloviki and their impact on Russian society.
It is known now that many of the former officials of the communist regime that knew how to move in the underground world of the Soviet Union and that had access to intelligence groups now have converted themselves and put all this intelligentsia in service of corruption. So they are stealing a lot of money and making a lot of dirty business in Russia.
What do you hope your coverage of corruption is able to accomplish?
Fighting corruption empowers people. It empowers the people at the most basic level in a state, in a society. If you have, for instance, massive amounts of money that are supposed to be assigned to public health, but the money is being stolen away through corruption, then the common people, the people of that country, are having their health care stolen from them, or their education, or their infrastructure, or this or that. So corruption violates the entitlement that people have to a decent life, to achieve something, to get somewhere. And corruption does engender terrorism. In countries where corruption is rampant and people have no piece of the pie, no place at the table, it is easy to turn to violence. It is easy to turn to the wrong thing because the system is so stacked. Why even play? Why even try?
And you can follow Jeff's work on voanews.com. It's time now for a little break. When we return, Islamic State militants and their propaganda war. You're watching On Assignment. Islamic State militants have been showing their power on the battlefield, but that's not the only place they've been waging war. The group has drawn a lot of attention for its use of propaganda and social media. I'm bringing in now VOA web reporter Matthew Hilburn, who has been following the Islamic State's activities online. Matt, tell us how this group has been using the internet to spread its message.
Well, they have tons of Twitter accounts out there. Nobody really knows how many, but estimates in the tens of thousands of Twitter accounts. Nobody's really sure how many of them are actually manned by an actual person. A lot of them are bots, but they just sort of serve as relay mechanisms to broadcast pictures of what the Islamic State has been doing in terms of on the battlefield, enforcing law, and even some pictures of them trying to rebuild areas and paint jobs on buildings, etc., showing sort of what good things they're doing for the community.
Right, and you know, a big part of that has been these videos we've seen of the beheadings of various aid workers and journalists who have been held hostage by the group. How are they using, I mean, what is sort of their point here?
Well, I think they have two audiences with those videos. One is obviously the West, to sort of give an idea, threaten, yeah, to be menacing. And it's also local politics and local military affairs, that anybody who might try to counter them will have that happen to them as well.
Right, now you've done extensive reporting on this, and there have been some reports recently that the group might actually be starting to wage a bit of cyber warfare. Talk to us about that.
Well, the Syrian government is certainly involved in cyber warfare. It's unclear how much the Islamic State is. There was a recent attempt to send some phishing malware to a group monitoring human rights in Syria. It was not a very sophisticated attack, but the idea was to try to locate this group of people who were reporting, trying to give more realistic reporting out of Syria than what ISIS propaganda shows. Luckily, they didn't open the link and they weren't discovered.
Right. Now, I think a lot of people would look at this and wonder, I mean, we've heard a lot of different reports about who are these militants. And so what are their capabilities in terms of cyber warfare? I mean, it seems that they're very much out there on the battlefield, but what are their capabilities online?
I think that remains a question. I don't know. This attack that I mentioned before was, like I said, not very sophisticated in terms of its technical aspect, but it was, experts told me, sophisticated in its social engineering aspect.
Yeah, and I think you know, people might look at this and also think, okay, so if we've got these militants that we're trying to seek out and to, you know, stop from doing what they've been doing and, you know, waging this terror across Syria and Iraq, and we see that they're putting out these messages, can't we then track them down?
I think it's a balance between wanting to shut down all of these accounts, which certainly that is happening. You see a lot of IS supporters, Islamic State supporters, who are, you know, Joe Schmo 13, so they've been deleted 13 times, or 12 times rather, and they just keep coming back. But I think there also is some open source intelligence that can be gathered from their tweets as well. So I think there's sort of a hesitance to shut it all down, because then you would really not have any idea what's going on there.
Right, and how does this speak to sort of the information age and this idea, this concept of information warfare?
Well, like I said, I think it's, like we see in a lot of places, it's a delicate balance between eliminating all of the accounts, which they probably could do, but keeping some that are open, that allow a view into their world, so to speak, however useful that might be.
Well, Matt, thank you so much for all you do to cover everything on the web for us. Again, Matt Hilburn, VOA web reporter. All right, coming up, we stay on the topic of the internet with a look at how to protect your online privacy. That's next. You're watching On Assignment. Censorship is something we've all seen at work in some form. Now online, some governments have made it their mission to block parts of the internet or spy on users and punish them for what they do on the web. But just as there are tools to invade privacy, there are also tools to get around it. VOA's Doug Bernard helped create a guide on circumventing censorship. You can find it on voanews.com. Take a look.
A lot of governments around the world don't necessarily want us getting our material to their citizens. So VOA and some of its parent organization has been working on these issues for a long time. And it just struck us that what could perhaps be of some use to people is a primer, basically a bit of a guide as to how to use some of these tools and to get to where you want to go online and keep yourself relatively private.
When you say, VOA has issues getting information to people, which countries are the most difficult?
Well, China far and away has the world's most sophisticated and most pervasive web filtering and monitoring apparatus. They spend many millions of dollars, maybe more, trying to keep their people from getting to the places they want to go, and also limiting what they have access to. But they're not alone. There's Russia, Iran certainly is an offender. There are a number of governments, and interestingly, sometimes these governments aren't chronic offenders, but they tend to really kind of tighten down control of the internet during times of unrest. We saw this in Egypt, we've seen it in Syria, so a lot of these things can kind of come and go.
So what can people do to get around this?
Well, there's a number of things, and that's really why we put this primer together. And there are really two aspects, I think, that we're looking at. One is helping people circumvent all that censorship that's out there. But something else I think that's really critical, and certainly we've seen this, people are thinking about it more, I think, in the wake of the Sony hack, allegedly committed by North Korea, although we still don't know, is privacy. How to keep themselves private or even perhaps anonymous, so governments, corporations, other people can't be spying on what they're saying or who they're saying it with.
Now, under the two categories, both protecting privacy and getting around censorship, what would you advise someone who's watching this segment right now that are the top things they need to be doing? I
like to, and other people like to call it, good web hygiene. Don't use passwords like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Change your password often, and don't use the same password device to device. Don't use free Wi-Fi, for example. That's just an invitation for people to come on into your mobile device and just have access to anything that they want. If you really want to keep yourself relatively anonymous so that governments aren't monitoring your web communication, you want a tool perhaps like Tor. Tor is a device that is a tool, an application, that you use that anonymizes and encodes your information. So if I'm sending you an email and I'm using Tor, it's all basically kind of kept anonymous.
You demonstrate all these concepts with a lot of graphics.
Right.
So how are you using those graphics, and what do you hope they accomplish?
Well, this project, I really do need to emphasize, is a team effort. You and I just happened to be talking, but there really was a team that went into putting this together. And we all agreed early on that it was very important to try and communicate very technical information, but in a way that's easy to understand and easy to grasp. So visually, we thought there has to be some kind of graphic component.
So you mentioned so many things changing all the time.
Constantly.
How do you stay on top of everything?
Well, again, the team really has to always be monitoring. There's always going to be new tools. This really is something of a race. Governments and others are always looking for new ways to keep people penned in, to wall off parts of the internet, and to also monitor what people are doing. But at the same time, there are other people who are always working on new tools to help combat that. So it's really important for individuals to take responsibility, in effect, to really kind of arm themselves and protect themselves and be very wary of what's going on out there.
About a third of the people in cities around the world live in housing that's considered substandard. And with the population continuing to grow, that problem might only be getting worse. So enter printable houses. Free plans are now available online for homes that anyone can assemble. We go to VOA's George Putic for more on these so-called wiki houses designed to be a perfect fit.
The world population is expected to grow to more than 8 billion by 2030, and the housing situation in urban centers is already a huge problem. But building new homes the traditional way still takes weeks or months. In a London neighborhood, a group of volunteers is constructing a house made of prefabricated plywood panels and parts, the so-called wiki house. All parts were precisely cut in a computer numerical control or CNC machine, following a free plan downloaded from the internet. Co-founder of the UK-based WikiHouse Foundation, architectural designer Alistair Parvin, says this could be the solution for affordable housing.
WikiHouse is essentially a series of technologies that we're developing aimed at massively simplifying the process of making really sustainable high-performance houses to a point where almost anyone can do it. And to do that, we're using the power of the web and digital manufacturing technologies like 3D printing.
Precise cutting allows a perfect fit for all parts, which speeds up the process of assembly. No special tools are required. The wiki house was built in 10 days for exhibition purposes. Then it was taken apart and reassembled elsewhere for permanent use. Parvin says the whole concept is based on the blueprints available online.
Open source software is now really established. It drives a lot of the software that we use. What's happening now is that that's now coming into the world of physical things. So we're effectively building a kind of Wikipedia for physical stuff.
Parvin says the project is in its early stages with limited availability, but he expects it to grow as more people start showing interest in houses whose assembly requires no special skills. George Putic, VOA News, Washington.
All right, building a house with no special skills or tools, you can sign me up for that. Well, we are almost out of time, but I want to mention that you can find On Assignment anytime at voanews.com, Facebook, and YouTube. And also coming soon, VOA programming, including our show, will be available to smartphone users on the African continent via the Tulu app. This is very exciting. We always are happy to have more ways to come to you guys and bring you all of our stories here from VOA. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. From all of us here at On Assignment, have a great week.